Hey, this is Duncecap, and you're listening to Cabbage's Hip Hop Podcast.
It was just, you guys dismissed the idea that Leprechaun could take Chucky so quickly without even considering the Leprechaun's powers whatsoever. You just like handed Chucky the belt without any discussion. And that rubbed me the wrong way. And now that I've seen a second Leprechaun film, it's even more apparent to me that Leprechaun would win this fight, because the powers from the first Leprechaun are barely even used in the second Leprechaun. We're talking about a whole new set of powers for the Leprechaun. Whereas Chucky's got the same demonic nonsense stabby thing the whole time.
See, this is where I disagree with you. And again, I'm not an expert on the Child's Play films. My opinion on it definitely came from the gut. But we did have an expert on the show. Fatboy Sharif is somebody who knows these movies, and he knows the Leprechaun movies.
No disrespect, but I just disagree.
You can disagree, but you're disagreeing with an expert. It's like being anti-vaccine. Like, you may have your opinion about microchips and all that, but this is somebody who understands
First of all,
science.
Assigning me the idea that I believe in microchips inside vaccines because I think Leprechaun can beat Chucky is a touch of a stretch.
I don't think it's that far a reach, to be perfectly honest.
Wow, I'm anti-vax now because I think that the Leprechaun can be. If the Leprechaun has his gold, I think he can beat Chucky.
I think you're just maybe susceptible to bad information, conspiracy theories, and wrong ideas about who would win in a horror movie fight.
That's outlandish. That's outlandish to say that. Bad information? I'm taking it straight from the films. Look, in the first film, right?
Do you believe this election was stolen?
From whomst?
Maybe we should just talk about this movie.
Maybe. That's what I'm trying to do here. So the first Leprechaun, he's able to teleport. He's able to operate machinery that is obviously not built for him. So he probably has some sort of like control over that machinery, you would think. His weaknesses are less pronounced. There's a 4-leaf clover, which is a weakness, and also shoes to some extent. And in the second one, the weakness is wrought iron. But those are not like known weaknesses. It's not like people come into these battles and they're like, all right, cool, I got my 4-leaf clover. It's not like with vampires where people are like, all right, I've got my wooden stake.
I feel like this is a conversation that children have, and it's starting to make my head hurt at how much thought you're putting into the who would win in a fight, Superman versus Batman.
But Superman versus Batman is easy. One has powers and the other one is rich. It's kind of a no-brainer on that one. This is one has powers, the other one is, I guess, kissed by the devil.
As much as I am loath to continue this part of the conversation, I'm sure it will come up with our guests a little later as we move on with this show. I hope that we can try to keep this conversation largely to the discussion of Leprechaun 2. We have some fantastic guests lined up today. So let's try to focus on that.
No, I want to focus entirely on the Chucky versus Leprechaun thing until you at least admit that I have points. You won't even admit that I have a point. You're just saying, no, you're wrong. And then saying, I'm not a Chucky expert.
Correct on all fronts.
The first film, once he gets his gold, he is wildly powerful. And if not for the old man telling them that they need to find a 4-leaf clover, they're all dead. Guaranteed. I would think that you would side with the Leprechaun because of his cop killing.
Just because I believe all cops are bad doesn't mean that I'm going to say that the Leprechaun would beat Chucky in a fight. That's absurd.
As absurd as saying that because I believe the Leprechaun can beat Chucky in a fight, that I'm anti-vax and I don't believe in fair elections.
You've heard it here first. Jeff is anti-vax and doesn't believe in fair elections.
This is terrifying.
Hello and welcome to Shamrocks, a Leprechaun movie podcast, the only unofficial weekly hip-hop podcast about the Leprechaun cinematic universe. I'm your host, Gary Suarez. I'm a freelance music journalist and critic, and I write a twice-weekly hip-hop newsletter called Cabbages, which you can subscribe to for free at cabbages.substack.com. Joining me as always is my co-host, music industry insider Jeffery Laughlin. Hello, Jeffrey. How are you?
You have really put me in a corner here. You've painted me into an anti-vaxxer, pro-Trump weirdo because I like the Leprechaun in a fight against Chucky. And I think it's unfair. Now, film number one, he's maliciously taunted and his gold is stolen. Yeah. In film two, it's only one piece of gold is stolen. And I do have trouble trying to figure out, like, if more gold is stolen, is he less powerful? Is this like a levels thing where, like, if he finds more of his gold? Because, like, other people's gold doesn't really add to his power. That's just his avarice.
Jeff, I'm just trying to get through the intro.
Right.
Like, you're just taking this way too seriously.
Okay, you're saying I'm taking it to, like, Hubie Halloween. I was like, a doubter, a powder, and a shouter, and I was deemed to be a terrible person. We had to go to therapy about it. But now I'm, like, into the films, and you're like, oh, it's not that serious. Oh, it's not really that big a deal. You're making too big of a deal about it, even though I called you an anti-vaxxer, pro-Trump Capitol stormer.
Let's just be able to move forward. Can we just go and talk about this? Can I continue? Can I just finish the rest of this intro, please? And we can bring our fantastic guests on.
Does the Leprechaun eat?
Today, we'll be talking about Leprechaun 2, the 1994 sequel that Variety magazine called, quote, a nasty piece of business that revels in chicanery and gore. And this time around, the Leprechaun isn't just looking for his gold, he's looking for love.
Aren't we all?
Back in a moment. I'm so excited to introduce our guests for today's show. Joining us now is Leah Sottile. She's a journalist with bylines in places like the New York Times and Playboy magazine, and she hosts the podcast 2 Minutes Past 9 for BBC4 and Bundyville for Oregon Public Broadcasting. Also joining us today is Duncecap. The Brooklyn-based rapper has recorded for labels including Backwoods Studios and You Don't Deserve This Beautiful Art. His latest album is called Resting Dunceface, available on Bandcamp and wherever music is streamed or sold. Please welcome both Leah and Duncecap to the show. Hello, and welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hello there. How are you today?
Oh, that's wonderful. Warm, dulcet tones. Well, we're here to talk about Leprechaun 2.
Toucan!
Oh, dear God. I think one thing we can all agree on is the prevalence of alcohol as a driver in this film. Starting with the discovery of the hobo's bottle that lures the leprechaun out of his tree, and then the iconic drinking contest scene. So my first question is, do you agree with the leprechaun's view that the only whiskey is Irish whiskey?
I mean, I feel like I'm kind of a generalist when it comes to drinking, so just sort of whatever is handed to me, I won't make a stink about.
Yeah, I'm kind of more along those lines. Also, I'm more of a clear liquors guy,
Right,
Neither
same.
of you is going to be the Leprechaun's bride.
I guess I wouldn't. The Canadian whiskey, that was a big deal. I wouldn't put up a fuss about it,
Same.
Yeah, I was a little surprised about his being lured out by that bottle of blended Canadian. Considering, as we learned later, we spend some time inside the leprechaun's home, which has many surprises. One of those surprises being plenty of bottles of whiskey. So I was a bit perplexed why that was in any way the kind of thing that would draw him out of that tree.
Well, and at that point, he's what, 2,000 years old? You'd think that he'd have a sense beyond of the contents beyond the glass, right? Like that he would know if it was Canadian or Irish whiskey at that point. I don't know.
No, I think you're right, because if he could smell the lineage of his former slave and first would-be bride from 1,000 years prior in the present day of Bridget, it seems to me he should be able to smell through a glass bottle what is and is not Irish whiskey.
100%.
Well, okay, but think about this though. It's been 1,000. Do we think it's been 1,000 years since he's been on the surface?
He said millennia like at least once, right? So,
Yeah, it's been a millennia since he's been upstairs, if you will. So
yeah.
If he hasn't been upstairs in 1,000 years, maybe like how does he have the whiskey from like in his lair? Where did that come from? Where did any of the cool tools
Is it
come
just
from?
aged?
1,000 years?
A millennia?
I like it. I would totally drink 1,000-year-old whiskey, I guess.
What I guess is not been stated is whether or not he spent those 1,000 years in seclusion. You have to assume that being a sneaky little leprechaun, he has had adventures out in the world during this time period, collecting gold and what have you.
You would assume one of them was the first adventure we watched.
No, we would not assume that, because as we've discussed before, Jeff, there's entirely separate things between that. These are two different movies,
but it's not two different leprechauns.
Wait, so is the first movie not canon?
That's what I'm being told, but I believe that the leprechaun is just fooling people. He doesn't really care how old he is.
I have a lot of questions about a lot of things.
Yeah, me too.
Fair.
But the alcohol is a good part to start off, because like before, the last movie was a lot like very shoe centric, but now it's all booze centric.
This is a grown-up version. The first movie, as we said on the first podcast, was originally a children's film. The studio rejected and said, make it a hard R. And they did reshoots that brought in new scenes of gore. I don't think they could have made it as shoe-centric in the second film. That being said, I think it's best not to think too hard about the first film as we talk about the second, because as I've said to Jeff before, these are distinct movies, regardless of the fact that they have the same star.
I just think he has a lot of powers and he only exercises the ones he feels like at the time.
And yeah.
Right? Okay. So
yeah.
If you're thinking about the first film at all, which I do a lot for some reason.
I wish you wouldn't.
Yeah, I know that. I know that you wish things. I do. And I'm going against your wishes on this. The first film powers overlap a little bit. The only difference really is the green lightning that shoots out of his fingers and the fact that 4-leaf clovers are somehow replaced with wrought iron.
Oh yeah.
That wrought iron is somehow leprechaun allergic.
I wondered if I had like missed that in the first one. That wasn't in the first Leprechaun at all,
no,
right?
There was no wrought iron mentioned at all.
And the only 4-leaf clover I feel like in 2 was like on the front of his little like death machine go-kart.
Mm-hmm.
If there was like a little 4-leaf clover with like an X through it.
He didn't like, it was him advertising that he does not like 4-leaf clovers.
I thought that was a good detail.
Yeah.
Also, I just think it's funny. Wrought iron, like it's just a complete sentence almost. Like it's just a type of like iron. Like what is this? What is wrought iron?
I'm looking it up.
It surprises me how much there was of it in Hollywood in the mid 1990s. I just don't really think I could find a lot of wrought iron in my apartment today.
I'm looking around.
Maybe in my heater. I don't know.
It's an iron alloy with low carbon content. What is that like? Why do leprechauns hate it?
I'm wondering, Jeff, while you're researching, are cauldrons typically wrought iron? I would think that they would be.
Oh, that's
that
really
makes
good point.
a very okay. I'm looking that up. Those are more cast iron. It says here.
Oh, cast iron.
And cast
different
iron
than
is
wrought.
mentioned in the Wikipedia. Cast iron is 2.1 to 4% carbon content, whereas wrought iron is less than 0.08%. Which?
There's something here with carbon and leprechauns.
Yeah. So, but like if leprechauns are allergic to carbon, then, don't they just explode?
I was very confused the first time he came into contact with wrought iron in Leprechaun 2 because it hadn't been explained that they were allergic, or maybe it's just it's like a shellfish allergy. It's like his allergy.
Oh, so like, well, okay. Do you think, so allergies and allergens like change in people as they get older? After 1,000 years, perhaps wrought iron has become a thing.
So for the first 1,000 years, it was gluten.
It might have been. He just like wasn't a bread guy.
Can I bring this back to reality? Because I think once we start reading things off the internet on a podcast, we are losing the plot here. The reason why wrought iron is his kryptonite, so to speak, is because the director of this movie, Rodman Flender, a real person's name, is not the same director as the first movie. And this director, Rodman Flender, took creative license as he went through this. He'd previously worked for B-movie master Roger Corman. He directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt. Later, he would go on direct episodes of shows like The Office and Ugly Betty, and the 1999 popular cult film Idle Hands. He came to this with his own ideas of what things should be. So he created this weakness for wrought iron. He created the rule about the 3 sneezes and the 1,000 years. So he's also responsible for this bizarre rule that I still have a great deal of trouble with, is that he can't kill Cody when he has the shilling. And that's something that I'm really most concerned about, because it seems to me that he's able to do harm to a lot of people who try to get his gold, or even just have gold, as we've learned, whether it is the agent on Hollywood Boulevard or the hobo with the gold tooth. I'm wondering, what do you think is so special about this particular coin that makes it protect Cody from the leprechaun's murderous rage?
Well,
That's a good question.
in the first film, he has magic powers if he has all of the gold. So maybe the reverse is also, if he doesn't have all of the gold, he loses his abilities somehow.
Well, how would that be the case if he was able to do what he did to Morty?
I don't really want to call him Morty. I want to call him D-grade George Carlin.
Okay, thank God. I was going to bring up, he sounds just like George Carlin.
It's pretty crazy how much they sound alike. Yeah.
You may have also seen him, the actor Sandy Barron, played Jack Klompus on Seinfeld, the episode with the pen.
That's where I was trying to figure out.
Oh, he looked familiar.
He's done a lot of other things too, but I think that's where a lot of our listeners, millennials, will recognize him from.
The shillings themselves are his original gold, and everything else is just avarice. The original gold has power. That's the point I was trying to make.
And maybe since this movie is about his wife and wedding night, maybe, he can't, get it on without the gold. Maybe that's the undertone here.
I haven't really thought about that.
The real horror of this film is not the gruesome kills or any of the twists and turns in the leprechaun's lair. It's the disgusting rapiness of the leprechaun towards Bridget, Siobhan Durkin. It's the stuff that would have been in a Saw film or a Hostel film later on. It's the implications when he gets her to his home in that tree is that he's going to disfigure her.
Yeah, I was confused. So did he come up with his own rule that leprechaun babies won't eat unless the mother looks like
the
a
wee
leprechaun?
ones won't suckle if you don't look like them.
Exactly. Like, where did this rule come from?
I have a lot of
leprechaun sex education.
You'll get used to
Also,
the
that
pain.
they have litters. That leprechauns apparently have litters. Surprising.
There are many surprises in a leprechaun's home.
This is from Rodman Flender. Again, these are the ideas that have come from his mind. And he thinks that horny leprechaun is the way to go for this movie. I don't know. What the fuck is the deal with baby leprechauns? Where do babies come from?
Like the leprechaun has magic on his side. can he just magically impregnate his bride?
He kind of did that with the money and
Right.
that poor man.
Right, exactly. Like he can make things grow inside of people. Perhaps that's why he's maybe choosing the amount of babies that are going to come from this bride sitch.
Like with the missing gold, is it that he can't, like, is that part of it? He can't impregnate Bridget without the gold, all of the gold? Or is it like, I feel like there's some element there of that getting that gold in order to like execute these plans of disfiguring Bridget and enslaving her and creating weird leprechaun babies in her body.
If he's going to disfigure this human, how is this going to happen to where she looks like a leprechaun?
Well, he says quite explicitly, many changes. So I imagine this is sort of in the kind of body horror style of films. I think about Tusk, for example. You know, what they did to Justin Long in that film is quite a transformation. I imagine it's something along those lines.
That makes sense.
But I want to get back to Leah's point, because I'm wondering if it's something specific about that shilling. Like he was looking for that one shilling on top of her when he dumped out his gold on top of her body. Maybe there's something specific about that one shilling that wasn't particularly well explained in the script, but that might be the thing that is preventing him from doing it.
I wasn't clear on why I mean, I've never had gold dumped on me, so I'm not really sure why one would do that, but I thought it was the ring too. I know, right? Like,
you know, I spend, that's usually my Saturdays. I just kind of lay around with a cool dress on, get some
just
gold dumped on me. Pretty sick.
The less we know about your life outside of this show, the better, Jeff.
Okay. You know, I think these people like my outside life as part of this podcast.
I would politely disagree.
Okay. Fair enough.
The only thing I can really think of is, like with most cases of impotence, it's psychological. That's the best conclusion that I can come up to with this. Is I think that there is something about it that makes him feel inadequate or unable to perform if he doesn't have all of his gold, you know, as many cases of impotence are, where if you don't feel like you have all the right conditions, you might be in feeling as if second guessing yourself, or feeling as though you might not be able to perform at the level that you want to perform at. And, you know, it's clear he hasn't had sex or whatever the leprechaun version of sex is, again, quite mysterious and thankfully left to the imagination.
Wait, do we know that though?
On.
Do we know he hasn't boned in 1,000 years?
He did say towards the end of the film that it's been a long time since he's had someone care for his needs.
Oh, that's correct. Good call.
Do you think he jerks off a lot? Because I was thinking,
Not
like,
if he doesn't have all his gold.
Well, okay. Well, he had it like in the tree, right? Well, he has all these illusions and stuff. Like, I was thinking, like, why does he really even need a girl at all? Like, why hurt a girl if you got illusions, man? Like, just chill.
Well, you know, again, I think it goes back to the stigmas associated with Roman Catholicism. Again, him being Irish, I think have really been drilled into people. I think the idea of from people of a certain age, and the leprechaun again being 2,000 years old, there's a bit of discomfort around the idea of self-pleasuring. And so I think that probably has something to do with his chastity and his, you might say he's the original incel, interestingly enough.
Huh.
I mean, I hate to be the one to make this connection, but no one has yet, so I will.
Please.
I mean, there's an inherent Trumpiness, right, to the leprechaun in the gold, like dripping in gold, the machismo around this needing all the gold. But I'm thinking that, like, yeah, he can't fully perform. I like this impotence argument that maybe he can't fully perform without every single bit of gold, in the same way that we've seen
And
the
the gold is
Empire
magic.
falling.
The gold has magic powers in both films. That is one of the main gel points of the two films, is that without the gold, he's singularly focused on the gold, and that's it. Like he leaves.
It's a treatise on capitalism, right? The whole movie, the whole concept.
He leaves his bride to just, like, I guess, starve. There's no food down there. There's nothing for her to do. and she can't escape, as we find out. So he just leaves his bride and is like, I got to go get this gold. And then we can like continue our, I guess, 1,000 years together.
Yeah, I didn't read Marla Maples' memoirs, so I can't say for certain if it's a one-to-one. But I think there is something to be said about the issues of inequality that show up in this. You know, the leprechaun has all the gold and wants more and more for senseless reasons. He's not even spending it. He is beyond miserly. And then you have characters like Cody, hustling young on Hollywood Boulevard, trying to get people on that tour, and Morty running that disastrous, financially disastrous tour himself. I think there's something to be said about class inequality and financial insecurity that plays strongly into the film.
Well, I mean, he is a greedy bastard. And he really enjoys pain as well. Other people's pain really like sets him off.
It's a dog eat dog world.
Yeah, and so that's like a double whammy. If he gets to rip somebody's finger off and it has a ring on it, that's just double delight.
That guy was also awesome that he ripped the finger off. Because he's like, what, a quarter? A quarter's not enough? He just rips his finger off and he goes, finger licking good. Like come on. I gotta say, like Warwick Davis like murdered all of his like quippy bars. He was spitting bars the whole time.
I love him. Like I love the Leprechaun unconditionally. And I will fight for the Leprechaun. One of the things that's married this whole experience for me, that's just been incredible, is that I've hated all of the characters that the Leprechaun torments. It's been fantastic. He like picks his victims so beautifully, minus like a couple here and there, shopkeeps, that sort of thing. He's a cop killer, and he's constantly messing with boring white people. It's amazing. He's an amazing character.
He like lawnmowered that one guy's face, right?
He
In this
sure
one,
did.
that guy
Oh,
was
yeah.
terrible.
That
He was
was awesome.
definitely.
Oh yeah,
that was great.
Raperson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Cody's like not a great guy. That's the lead, right? Like
He's no catch.
He's swindling people. He's like, hey, these suckers who want to, hey, like Disney can't compete with this. Like, come on, man. Like, let him go to Disney.
But isn't he also supposed to be teenaged? I mean, the idea is that he is not, you know, he's what, like 16, 17 or how he's supposed to be in this film. He's not supposed to be an adult with scruples. He's somehow come under the wing of this, you know, huckster.
He was orphaned, right? He was isn't that what Morty, low grade George Carlin said?
By that point in the film, I'm just wary of anything that Morty says, as whether it might be truthful or not. But I think if we do take that at face value, you know, Cody's come under the wing of this guy struggling to survive, you know, as many people do in Hollywood, or so I hear. I think there's a lot of commentary about Hollywood in this film. Obviously, the Hollywood agent is the most overt version of it. You know, Cody is somebody who's in Hollywood not to have, you know, an acting career. He's not aspiring to be some kind of film star. He's just trying to get by and make a few bucks along the way.
At some point, Morty, while in the police station, the kid tells Morty that he should become an actor, and Morty goes, there's no money in it. Which is amazing because they have no money. Anyway,
they live in squalor.
Right. There's nothing to their lives. It's amazing.
So much of the script seems like it's coming from the mind of someone feeling quite jaded by Hollywood. He'd done some acting, you know, Rodman Flender had done some acting work as well. And, you know, for Warwick Davis, who had plenty of good parts prior to this, you know, he'd done Willow, Return of the Jedi. And then, of course, there's the fight with William Skeleton, the 1,000-year-old skeleton, undead, which is a metaphor for nothing.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty much freed when he blessed the girl sneezing in the woods, which was the same actress, right? That played Bridget.
It was.
Oh, yes.
That's something.
Okay.
That's something I definitely want to hit on for a second. That the lineage of the O'Days has changed 0% in 1,000 years. She looks exactly the same as her, however many great you put in front of grandmother. It's been 1,000 years and they're the exact same people. That's pretty incredible. That takes a lot of determination to marry people like Cody over and over and over again to create the same type of human.
Wait, also, he saved his daughter by saying like "God bless you" or something.
So the leprechaun laid it out for him and said, if she sneezes thrice, she'll be my bride, right? And then he gave away the thing that the guy could do. He said, if you just say God bless you, it breaks the spell. But your freedom is now back off the table as a bargaining chip.
I see.
Yeah. So he did not gain his freedom by freeing his daughter.
Assumingly, he received his freedom through death by having his next step. I thought that was the end. Death was the end, but apparently.
Same.
But leprechauns are tricksters. Maybe he had his fingers crossed. That is something that we saw in the film.
Mm-hmm. He still keeps his fingers crossed when he lies, though.
That's true.
The power of lying.
Which also feels like a very modern touch. Like, where would he learn about finger crossing?
Is that modern?
I guess that's a good question. Really, where? And Jeff, you like to read things off the internet.
I do.
Feel free to go look. Feel free to go look it up while the rest of us have a conversation. It does seem like a very 90s sort of movie trope, 80s or 90s movie film trope. The idea of the cross your fingers. It took me out of the moment, I guess.
Well, let me tell you
to see
something,
that.
Gary. Let me bring you back in the moment. Common usage of the gesture traces back to early centuries of the Christian church.
Like the leprechaun days.
Yeah, they would cross their fingers to invoke the power associated with Christ's cross.
Huh.
So
You think they did that like during unprotected sex and stuff too?
yeah, no, I mean, I know for a fact that keeps you from being able to have babies.
That's what I
I'm
thought.
sorry, litters.
I mean, everyone in this, it seems like this movie is all like grifters, right? Like there's a whole lot of grifting happening in this movie. Is the leprechaun a grifter, or is he like he grifts, he steals, he takes the poor man's tooth out of his mouth. He's willing to go that far. But it does seem like he's a grifter.
He's wildly malicious, but he's also, he's a trickster as well.
Maybe it's just like an addiction to gold.
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
Addiction. Hello, people. Alcohol.
Speaking of the alcohol, we should discuss at some point the drinking contest, the unfair drinking contest.
Okay, I'm confused because when the bartender gave him, what did he say, red special or something? It was like, what did he say? It was a blend of Coke and what? Water?
Good question.
It wasn't alcohol.
I believe so. It was a non-alcoholic mixture.
Yeah.
So then when he says like, give me a bottle of red special and then gives that to the leprechaun, I was very confused why.
Okay, so
drunk.
the leprechaun got hard liquor.
Yeah, the leprechaun got hard liquor, and Morty had the bottle of the red special rye for himself.
And so he was drinking the red special rye, which was non-alcoholic, and he tricked the leprechaun, which is a tricking the trickster sort of thing, a Shakespearean turn, if you will. And I felt like Morty was like the wise jester of this film, if we're going to go Shakespearean. So he tricked the leprechaun and got him really, really wasted. And one of my favorite parts of the film was the leprechaun trying to throw an ashtray in their faces.
That was awesome.
Was totally unable to do it. He was so wasted.
And he couldn't even do his leprechaun rhyme either.
Right. He was really trying to be a leprechaun, but was like, oh man, this is bad.
But then he was able to still escape. So it was very short-lived.
Right.
He had the presence of mind, even under all that circumstance, just smash a bottle over Morty's head and get out of there. So
also, I like that Morty was leaving. Well, that didn't work. I'm like, what did you expect to do while he was drunk?
Right.
What do you think you were going to do with this leprechaun while he was too wasted to even teleport an ashtray?
Also, for someone who like comes out of their treehouse after 1,000 years for a bottle of booze, like I feel like it wouldn't be so much of a thing that like debilitates him. He has like magic powers. Why?
He did drink 6. It looked like to me, I didn't get a full count. It was at least 5 or 6 bottles of liquor.
Oh, complete bottles,
Yeah,
right?
he like downed 6 bottles of liquor, which by the way, that bar has got to be pretty upset about not getting paid on those. That's like
Yeah.
Swindlers keep swindling, you know?
Swindler's going to swindle.
Yeah, the Leprechaun's refusal to pay for things certainly factors into a lot of this film. And perhaps the most shocking version is immediately following this scene when he is next seen at an espresso bar drinking ungodly amounts of coffee, or at least shown with tons of cups of coffee laid out in front of him. And the barista, played by Mad TV's Michael McDonald,
The second best Michael McDonald.
the first obviously being who exactly?
The best Michael McDonald is the blue-eyed soul singer of I Keep Forgetting. Put it together. Come on, Gary.
I didn't know he actually had songs.
Oh, you bet.
Oh my.
This is meant to hurt me, right? You guys got together beforehand.
Are you going to say that Michael McDonald, who gave us loads of laughs on Mad TV, is somehow lesser than the guy who sang a cover of Ain't No Mountain High Enough to Sell Me Long Distance Calling?
Not only am I going to say it, I already said it. He also gave us I Keep Forgetting, which became Warren G's Regulate. So let's not like jump around and act like this isn't an amazing thing. We're on a rap podcast. People like
Look,
Michael
if you want to
McDonald.
talk about the merits of Warren G, I'm all here for that. Not for this episode, but for a different episode for sure. And we'd love to have you guys back to talk about Warren G with us.
Sure.
But we are
The
talking
Michael McDonald episode.
Oh, for sure. But I
Done.
think
Oh,
we can.
please.
I think we can all disagree with Jeff on this.
All does everybody? I want to know. Does
I don't know
everybody
how I
stand
feel.
against Michael McDonald on this? On the blue-eyed soul, gray-bearded Michael McDonald of the
I
Doobie
think
Brothers,
he's-
by the way.
I think he's forgettable.
I mean,
You're forgettable.
That's
Jeff,
fair.
I've never been a big Steely Dan person.
He
Like,
wasn't in Steely.
And wasn't he in Steely Dan?
He did backup vocals.
He was
did
in the
backup vocals.
Doobie
Those-
Brothers.
That's how unmemorable he is. Clearly, Jeff.
Oh, he did. No, he was in Steely Dan. Maybe
he
he
did
one
backup
song,
vocals.
Steely Dan.
He did Peg.
Regardless, Doobie Brothers don't really do it for me, but I can see it's like one of those things where you could see that the person does a thing that's notable, at least. I mean, I could see that he's of note.
You don't know me, but I'm your brother. That's all I have to say about that.
I can't do it.
Can we talk about powers? Can we talk about the Leprechaun's powers for a second?
As long as you won't sing about them, I'm open to it.
Okay, first that I have a beautiful voice. I sing like an angel.
It wasn't that bad.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. I'm sorry,
I
Duncecap.
appreciate the bicker, but you know, that was all right.
So powers. So we have a running thing. I believe that the Leprechaun can beat Chucky. Gary and every other guest we've had thus far, Fatboy Sharif being the only one, don't believe that. But I want to talk about powers in this specific film. Metaphysically maintains a slave with a tightening collar, can disappear, can put people under spells to force them to fall in love, can become other people and or manifest them, can throw other people's voices, can move objects with his mind, can make people sneeze, and can make other people teleport with him.
All right, that's like 3. That's illusion, that's force, and teleporting. And I don't, to be fair, I haven't seen all of the Child's Play movies.
Good for you.
But right now, before when I saw the first one, I would say, hey, I'm up for this fight. I even messaged, the podcast, and like now, gotta say, Lep 2, his powers are looking a little weak, but
Thank you.
But I did think the first scene, I was like, I want to see this guy in like a Mortal Kombat game. Like, I think he's a cool fighting, like gristly dude, but he's weak in this movie for sure. Like, he's crossing his fingers to do shit. I mean, I know that's not for powers, but like,
So like, yeah,
I think
if he
he's a nice
doesn't
guy
have
in
all
this.
his gold, I totally understand how you would feel like Chuck. But if we're looking at a world where all things are even and he has his gold, I'm picking the Leprechaun.
Does Chucky have what is Chucky's like key weakness? Not having seen those movies in a very long time. Because I feel like the leprechaun has pretty big weaknesses, right? If he doesn't have a coin, he's like impotent and can't like do things completely. And he's able to get like, you could get him drunk pretty easily, it seems like.
It was
I don't
6
know.
bottles of liquor. Come on. It wasn't.
Like he's
that
1,000
easy.
years old. He should have a tolerance at this point, right?
Thank you.
2,000 years old.
Mhm.
I feel like older people have lower tolerances. Am I crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, I've never met someone that old.
And I think that's an ageist statement as well.
It's
Jeff,
ageist to think that people who are older don't drink as much.
Well, you changed it. It was actually that they could handle their alcohol.
Thank you.
Well,
You're
that
thinking
wasn't
a lot,
even-
Gary. You're incorrect on this. Leprechaun can beat Chucky straight up.
Come on, guys. I think it would be
What's
a
Chucky's
tie.
weakness though? Like, does Chucky have a key weakness? Like, if he doesn't have a coin,
Like
he
his
can't
batteries
fully
fall out or
perform.
something?
You
Right.
can't kill Chucky. Chucky never dies. You can't destroy Chucky. And like the difference between, I've said this to Jeff before, the difference between the Chucky movies and the Leprechaun movies is Chucky is a concept created by essentially one person who has written and or directed all the
So the
films in that
Leprechaun's
series.
weakness is that there are different directors in the cinematic universe. That's ridiculous.
I don't buy that.
That's absolutely
Chucky is
ridiculous.
Chucky. Chucky is not the writer of Chucky. Like, I'm not fighting Stan Lee if I'm fighting Spider-Man.
That's a fine point. Thank you, Duncecap.
Ugh. Download my music. But yeah,
You wonder, are you making the comparison between the leprechaun and Chucky because they're both small?
Yes.
That's exactly
Maybe
what he's doing.
maybe it should be what's an
It's fair,
old
though.
maybe it should be a very old villain. Like what would that person be? Who's 2,000 years old?
a
don't know.
mummy.
Yeah, you would have to go mummy or vampire in that world, right? Do werewolves
sure
live
there's
forever?
other
I don't
stuff.
think they do.
I mean, I think he'd beat the shit out of Dracula. I'm pretty confident of that.
I'm with that.
Dracula, Leprechaun. Yeah, I'm Team Lep.
Like the leprechaun can handle sunlight just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
True. Yeah,
Right. There aren't whole portions of like the day he can't function.
I think he would be Freddy Krueger's like little daytime boy. You know,
Mhm.
well, he's not a boy. That's derogatory. But like his daytime associate, because they're kind of the same thing. You know, they're like say something fucking cool, and then like use illusion to psychologically torture your victim.
Not to mention can like raise, I didn't even put in can raise the dead.
And wrinkly heads.
Oh, they've got very wrinkly heads. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad we got through that. I knew we needed to do that, and I'm glad we got it out of the way.
So this film has a relatively low death toll, which is quite surprising to me. You've got Ian, who's the rapey goat cart jerk. You have the barista, played again by the great Michael McDonald. Morty, who has the most fantastic death scene in the film with the pot of gold appearing in his tummy. And the security guard, whose name we thankfully never learn. And then I would say, and it's 5 in total if you count William O'Day, who
Yeah.
continues to live on as an undead skeleton. But I have trouble believing that he
Do we-
really counts.
Do we count the leprechaun as a death?
No, we never count the leprechaun as a death
Okay,
because
cool,
he
cool,
doesn't
cool.
die.
Well,
Yeah,
he
doesn't-
did blow up. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Well, he blows up, but I mean that's as like he has
It
a
was
tendency
more
to explode.
Well, he explodes in the second one. The first one was kind of like, I'm dead, gurgle, gurgle, wink, wink, you know? But this one, like, it was like, all right, see you later.
Yeah, it was an actual, like, he really blew up. So it was pretty
Like,
sad.
it wasn't like little pieces slithered back. I wasn't expecting a Leprechaun 3, I'll tell you that.
Now, obviously, they did the sequels to this. After the first movie was in the sticks and the second movie was in Los Angeles, he goes to Las Vegas. He goes to space. He goes to the hood twice. After the second Hood movie, he hasn't done another one since. They've done 2 reboots of quality that is not worth us discussing.
We
on this
like
podcast.
to think those don't exist.
They're non-canonical. But the Warwick Davis, when asked about what to do for a new movie sequel, he came up with the idea of a sequel that was Pirates of the Caribbean style, where he appears. It takes him into a period piece. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how he might fare on the high seas.
This is blowing my mind.
I hadn't thought about this. I'm not prepared.
I love the idea of him going into that sort of world and doing something on a boat, because everybody's trapped on a boat.
Yeah. And also, like, pirates is another thing that just, like, makes sense with this.
If it's
franchise.
old-timey pirates too, there's not going to be a lot of wrought iron other than the cannons, I guess.
But
Am I
buried
gonna-
treasure.
There's some buried treasure elements. There's also no grass. So you're not going to get any,
3 4
perhaps a
clovers.
captain has a bookmark or something that's a 4-leaf clover, but you're really probably not going to see one.
Guys, I really
It's-
like this. Like,
Yeah, I was going to say this is a great idea. It seems like a pro Leprechaun environment. Like he could really do a lot of damage.
they're doing another Willow. Maybe this will happen.
I'm hoping once he gets done with that, he'll return to his most beloved character.
Seriously, 'tis the decade for this kind of thing. And if that's his idea, dude, it's too good. It's too good. Warwick knows this.
I like 2 better than 1.
Okay.
I like it better than 1 mostly because the first one is like still stuck between kid and adult film. And this was a film, while it wasn't very good, was definitely for adults.
See, I really like the fact that the first movie is in that category of not quite one thing or the other. It's one of my favorite things in watching a B movie or watching a movie that is, not going to win any Oscars by any stretch of the imagination.
Totally. I do love a film that you kind of have to sit back and be like, who's this for? Who is the intended audience? And I feel like the intended audience of Leprechaun 2 was set in stone, whereas the first one, of course, was not.
Yeah, and I think about, for me, the movie Old Dogs with John Travolta and Robin Williams.
One of the greatest, worst films of all time. A film that I nearly peed myself from laughing at how terrible it truly was.
It is so funny for its awfulness, and I've watched it multiple times, and I have yet to figure out who this film is actually for.
This is something that my friends and I have debated for years. When they made Old Dogs, who did they make it for? Was it a children's film? The kids are prevalent in it.
Because kids love John Travolta.
And Robin Williams. I know when I was 6, I was like, oh man, I want to see the next Robin Williams film.
Yeah, at some point, you have to just realize that these films get made and they get reshoots and they fall into complete tonal disarray.
Right.
And as a viewer, an aficionado of this category of film,
Right.
I love it so much. And that's why I think I have an affection. I would say an affection for the first Leprechaun movie. Because when you understand that a lot of the decisions that were made were to make it palatable for a 12-year-old.
When you told me that in the first podcast, I did not know that until you told me. And it totally explained why he was on so many wheels, why he was riding behind a car on roller skates when he has magical powers and can just appear in the car. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas in this one, all of the powers associated with the Leprechaun were specifically malicious.
Exactly. I think the problem with Leprechaun 2 is that it is very much a Roger Corman style film that fully embraces the tropes of a Roger Corman film. There's the gratuitous nudity, and we didn't talk about that.
I mean, it was only one nude scene.
There was one nude scene that was
But it
very
was
gratuitous.
long.
It was repeatedly showed Bridget's breasts.
Mhm.
And again, she's supposed to be a teenager. So it really does add a certain gross factor to it.
That makes sense.
Looking at it with today's eyes, but it's exactly the kind of thing that you would see in a
However, the
Roger Corman film.
comeuppance of that scene was very good. I mean, that guy getting his face sawed off by fans.
Oh, that's a delight.
Pretty
That's
sick.
Look, if it hadn't been for the incredible kill scene with Morty and the pot of gold,
That would have easily been the best one thus far in the whole series.
for sure, it would have been. No
Those are
question.
1 and 2. So it's like Morty's stomach exploding with a pot of gold,
Yeah,
which still makes me laugh. And then this guy's fan face are like 1 and 2 in the series thus far.
yeah.
So, I mean, we haven't seen any more of them. So,
It knows what it is now.
Hmm.
The first movie didn't know what it was, and that made it
Do you
unpredictable.
think that cures itself? Do you think that cures itself in part 3? So there's like a couple of different types of Vegas movies. There's entrenched Vegas with your like casino type style, where these are lifelong Vegas people doing Vegas shit.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And like cheating the system. Ocean's 11 comes to mind.
Yes.
Casino, that sort of thing. Entrenched in it, they know how to beat the system. Gamblers, that sort of thing. Degenerates. And then there's like road trippy Vegas style, where you're like rolling up and you're like, oh my God, Vegas, Vegas, baby. Which one do you think this one's going to be?
Again, I have seen the third one, but it's been about 6 years, so I am hazy on the details. If I recall the third one correctly, I feel like you're leaning more into the humor side of things.
So it's like outsiders coming in and trying to game Vegas. Okay.
And it just like, I think when you think about where is a great place to put the Leprechaun, putting him in Las Vegas makes a great deal of sense. It makes a great deal of sense from the perspective of that this has been to date a very West Coast centric series of
has.
films.
It
Like
has.
he hasn't come to New York. You know, he hasn't gone.
We have asked people where the Leprechaun should go next, and nobody's been like the East Coast.
Right. No one says. No one's like send him to Philly.
Right.
You know,
Let's see what happens when he's in Baltimore. Honestly, Leprechaun in Baltimore would be kind of sick, depending upon the years, like the era of Baltimore he's in.
There's only really one place the Leprechaun belongs on the East
Tallahassee.
Coast, and it's Boston.
Oh, sure, Boston.
He's got to be in Boston.
He's
There's
gotta
no
be in
other reason why he should go to the East Coast.
I like the idea of the Leprechaun hanging in Miami, the port of Miami Leprechaun.
You mean
It's
just like him and
it's
Rick Ross?
It's just like a fun time. They're just doing gangster shit, you know? And then Rick Ross turns on him and takes his gold. I can't wait for him to interact with rappers.
I don't see finally how he interacts with non-white people,
That will be fun.
because we haven't seen that yet.
There's no way they can make people of color in this worse than the white people that have been in these movies. So maybe I'll actually cheer for somebody who's not the Leprechaun at some point. Thus far, I've just been like Leprechaun all day long. I'm
Look,
taking the Leprechaun.
it's been very easy to root for the Leprechaun in these films.
Agreed.
And the truth is, like, we're talking about the 5th and 6th films or the Hood films. So we may have Stockholm syndrome by then,
Toucan!
or Killarney syndrome, I suppose.
He is the genius from Killarney. Do you think you were going to fool the genius from Killarney?
Can we talk about this genius aspect for a sec? Because that is a little baffling to me.
He truly believes he's a genius. I'm looking up the quote now. Did you think you could outsmart me, the genius of Killarney?
There's a real narcissism that exists there that absolutely blows my mind, because he is tricked in the end with a milk chocolate coin.
Right. Like he's so good with gold, but in this case, he was so greedy, I guess, that he didn't notice that when he grabbed it, it like was malleable immediately.
And this goes back to why I think Chucky would whoop his ass, because
Okay.
he is easily fooled.
All right.
He thinks he's hot shit. He thinks he is this
So does
master
Chuck.
trickster.
Like Chucky's also got an air of like, killers in these films always have this air of like, I am amazing. Freddy was hugely like into himself. You know what I mean? They're all, what's the word I'm looking for?
Narcissism.
Narcissism. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most
all
horror movie killers have a certain narcissistic hubris to them.
Right.
I think that's a fair statement.
And this comes to a question: do you believe that the Leprechaun has extra narcissism? There's an extra layer of narcissism because of the greed, the avarice.
100%. I think that is his Achilles heel in many ways. You forget about wrought iron, which wasn't in the first movie, and I don't know if it'll last in the next one.
I get the feeling it won't. I get the feeling the powers and the problems will shift from movie to movie. I think that's the dynamic.
Yeah. As we go forward with this series, we'll get a better sense of his personality. But it seems to me that narcissism and greed drive him, and he has a self-confidence that's overinflated, and in at least one case ends up with him exploding.
The pride comes before the explosion. That's a known. We know that.
Well said.
I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Did you have your fingers crossed when you said you hated Michael McDonald?
Yes.
I knew it. Michael McDonald rules, and you knew that he ruled, and you lied to these people. But since you had your fingers crossed, I can't really get mad. Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no river low enough to keep me from getting to you, baby.